Hi, Cora Stack here again. This is a more disturbing part of the whistleblowing retaliation, and it's again, I believe now, looking at my research, it's to do with how litigants and persons are treated in the courts, particularly with regard to with regard to child custody, So again, money buys justice, and why I think the court system has completely failed, but this would be the main one, I think. So how my research in parental alienation was used to retaliate against me, a whistleblower story. Again, a researcher in whistleblowing. You see, the thing is that I hadn't realised that there is this huge discrimination against litigants in person. One way of doing it, particularly if you've inadvertently hit on someone who deliberately maybe a narcissistic, we'll take child psychologist allegedly, that has a reputation perhaps for being anti-women, and generally anti-women might mean anti-litigants, that appears to be what I discovered from the research, but I can't name any names or anything like that. So that again would be seen as very critical of the family court system in Ireland, that it's all about money, and money buys the custody and justice and so on. So this is what I found out, and this will be exclusive as well, of course. And so I didn't realise that I've no names in my research, but I suppose the very actors would know who they were, all right, you see, and they'd have codes and everything like that. They'd know that who they were, so they'd recognise who they were, but they wouldn't want anyone else to recognise. Now the Irish Times did publish these articles, but they wouldn't tell me who the various individuals were. So bound to secrecy, but it was the Irish Times that had these. I found them there, so I just put them up in my paper. And I also referred to a book called Don't Hug Your Mother, and this involved various court actors as well. I don't know, are they still there, but certainly the mother was unrepresented, as I understand it, or very poorly represented. In any case, it's a shocking story by two Dublin boys. In this video, I want to tell a story that should have never happened. A story about Ireland's family law system, parental alienation, coercive control, and retaliation. This is the story of how legitimate academic research I conducted in good faith, research grounded in evidence, was turned against me. Not because it was wrong, because it was right. And people are reading it all around the world now on academia.edu. So I see it's every week people are looking at it, and, because it exposed something the system did not want anyone to see. Several years ago, I wrote a paper on parental alienation in Ireland. It highlighted something deeply uncomfortable, that parental alienation is a form of psychological violence, that it fits the legal definition of coercive control of a parent, and that in some custody disputes, professionals may intentionally assist manipulative litigants, enabling harmful outcomes for children and parents alike. I identified patterns involving court-appointed experts, social workers, private psychologists, and a small circle of court actors who regularly appear in custody disputes. I showed how some professionals were influencing outcomes, sometimes betrothing litigants and persons with litigants with narcissistic or manipulative traits similar to their own, and how this created devastating consequences for lay litigants, particularly mothers without legal representation. My intention was simple: expose the problem so it could be fixed. This is the job of a researcher. This is the duty of an academic, and that is the responsibility of a researcher engaging in this type of work, which is, I suppose, very dangerous. I look back on it, very dangerous. It was very dangerous. But instead of being welcomed, my research was treated as dangerous. Why? Because it pointed again to uncomfortable truths. It raised questions about the integrity of custody assessments, bias towards represented versus unrepresented parents, the unregulated influence of certain experts, and the systematic mishandling of parental alienation in Ireland. It showed how alienation used a weapon, and how some professionals may be enabling it, even unintentionally. Well, in my case, it definitely was the opposite. In a system that hides behind secrecy, accountability is seen as a threat, and whistleblowing is seen as disloyalty. What happened next was not an accident, it was retaliation. Instead of engaging with the research academically, the system discredited me, attacked my credibility, ignored the evidence, painted me as a problem rather than a researcher, and eventually used the family law press itself as the tool to punish me. My work on parental alienation, which clearly stated that alienation is a form of coerced control, was twisted into something else. It was used to portray me as a troublemaker, an activist, a critic of the courts, and someone who needed to be put in her place. And the tragic irony is the very abuse I was writing about, coercive control through the courts, was then inflicted on me. This is why I wrote that paper when the state mirrors the abuser. I mean, I'm just one of many people where this has happened to, but it doesn't help. You know, it's a terrible thing when the state mirrors the abuser, and the cases I've looked at, many cases over the years, and many of them involve women. How the system punished a whistleblower. What retaliation looks like in family law. It looks like a parent being systematically disbelieved, legitimate concerns being dismissed, professional reports being weaponised, court processes being used to isolate and silence, years of litigation draining energy and finances and dignity, and the most painful outcome of all, being separated from her own children, knowing that the children have been subjected to psychological violence. Because this is now, my research threatened a small but powerful group of professionals, and the price of exposing them was enormous. The message was clear: do not criticise the system, do not expose misconduct, do not question the experts, and if you do, you will be made an example of. And that's what retaliation looks like in a closed system. Then something happened abroad that changed everything. This year, the Danish Supreme Court declared parental alienation as a form of psychological violence. January 2005, exactly what I had argued, exactly what my research stated, exactly what the Irish courts and other agencies refused to recognise. Internationally, in Denmark, Spain, Italy, Britain and UL, parental alienation is now being understood of coercive control, child psychological abuse, and a crime when severe. This development validates the core findings of my research years ago. It proves that the retaliation I faced was not because my work lacked merit, but because the Irish system was not prepared to confront its own failures. And again, I'm putting it down to legal capture. And, today, the issue is no longer hidden. Parental alienation has been recognised internationally. The public is becoming more aware, and research is clear. Yet Ireland still lags behind, and whistleblowers continue to pay the price for speaking truth. But the truth remains: parental alienation is severe psychological violence. It is also coercive control, and no parent, no child, and no researcher should ever be punished for saying so. This video is not about blame, it's about accountability. It's about shining a light on a system that prefers silence over truth. Whistleblowers should be protected, not destroyed. Researchers should be valued, not punished. And parents should never lose their children because they dared to expose misconduct and injustice. Thank you for listening. And if this story resonates with you, you are not alone.